All right, dives right in. Today we're heading to the North Atlantic, the Faroe Islands specifically.
I like this one already.
You send over some articles from vp.fo, and let me tell you, this is not your typical news roundup.
Not even close, right?
No way. We're talking international relations, food, culture, you name it. We're covering it all today.
What's really interesting about these articles is how they capture that mix of global and local that the Faroe Islands seem to embody so well. It's like, yeah, we're a small island nation, but the world is right here on our doorstep, you know?
Totally. It's like we're getting a glimpse into their world. And speaking of global, we got to start with the Middle East.
Mm.
vp.fo is all over this escalating conflict.
Yeah, it's a tense situation for sure.
Hezbollah drone attacks in Israel, casualties reported, and now the U.S. is sending a highly advanced missile defense system, whatever that means.
Well, it's definitely a sign that things are escalating.
For sure.
Yeah.
But this isn't just some isolated incident, right?
No, not at all. To really understand what's happening, you got to look at the historical complexities of the region. There's a lot of baggage, a lot of tension that goes way back.
So it's not as simple as just good guys and bad guys.
Definitely not. It's important to remember that there are multiple perspectives at play here.
Okay, so on a totally different note, are you ready for a story about pancakes?
I am always ready for a story about pancakes.
Okay, good, because apparently a chef on the Norrona ferry, Martin Fagoy, is retiring. This guy made, get this, 1.5 million pancakes.
1.5 million.
1.5 million. I can barely make toast without burning it.
That's amazing. You know, sometimes those little quirky stories, they tell you more about a place than anything else.
What do you think this pancake thing says about the Faroe Islands, then?
Well, first off, the ferry, right? Obvious connection to the sea. But it also says something about the people, I think.
Like what?
This chef, he's like a local legend, right? People love his pancakes. It's about community, shared experience.
I love that. Speaking of bringing things together, vp.fo has this article about how Faroese companies are some of the most innovative in all of Europe. Over half of them are actively engaged in innovation, which is wild.
It is impressive, especially for a nation of their size.
Right. What are they doing differently over there?
That's the million-dollar question. It challenges our assumptions about innovation, you know? We always think Silicon Valley, but the Faroe Islands, it's exciting.
Totally agree. Okay, switching gears a bit, there's this article about a Faroese Reformation Bible that's coming out soon.
This is a big deal, actually. To understand why you have to go back, look at the historical context.
Okay, give me some context.
So the Reformation, it wasn't just about religious doctrine. It had a huge impact on language, on literacy, even national identity across Europe.
So this new translation, it's more than just words on a page.
Exactly. It's about connecting with history, reclaiming their own language. Before, everything was in Danish, you see.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. All right, moving on. There's this heartwarming story about school children in Runavik.
Oh, yeah, the dancing kids.
Yes, they love to dance during their breaks. Like, forget hanging out, they're busting a move.
It's great. Talk about incorporating physical activity into the school day, right?
Right. Makes you wonder if other schools could learn a thing or two from them.
For sure. It seems like the Faroe Islands might be onto something with this whole innovation thing, and not just in the tech world either.
I'm seeing a theme here. Okay, we've got international conflicts, pancake milestones, and dancing school children. What other surprises await in our Faroes news adventure? Stay tuned, we're diving right back in after the break.
You know, it's kind of wild to think about how many things happening in the Faroe Islands reflect what's going on around the world.
Right.
Like this next article from vp.fo talks about all these firearms getting confiscated at U.S. airports, thousands every year.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, over 5,000 just this year alone.
That's a crazy number, 5,000 firearms.
Mhm.
Makes you think about, like, the bigger issue of gun violence and all that.
Yeah, it really makes you think about those things. Cultural attitudes towards guns, how effective security measures actually are, the whole debate around gun control, it's a big one.
It's definitely a reminder that these issues, they don't just stay confined to one country, you know.
Absolutely not. It's all connected.
Speaking of connected, let's talk about Ukraine. vp.ogfo has an update on the situation there, particularly in the Kursk region.
Things are not looking good. It sounds like the Russian advance is continuing, and there's talk of Ukrainian forces potentially being encircled.
That's really concerning. It's easy to forget about these conflicts when they're not on the front page every day, you know?
It's important to remember what's at stake, the human cost of these conflicts.
Totally. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. vp.ofo also has this heartwarming piece about an upcoming anniversary. the Norra Stray Moyarj Avnarfalag.
50 years, that's pretty incredible.
It is. What do you think makes these kinds of anniversaries so important?
I think it's about celebrating shared history.
Hmm.
It brings people together, reminds them of what they have in common, especially in a place like the Faroe Islands where community is so central.
Community is definitely key. And speaking of incredible dedication, VP.Hev highlights a staff member at the Ellisheim Nursing Home, Rondi Kerbeek. She received the King's Medal of Merit.
That's quite an honor.
I know, right? And for 40 years of service, that's dedication right there.
Absolutely. 40 years of caring for others, that's something special.
Makes you realize that heroes don't always wear capes, right?
Sometimes they wear scrubs, exactly.
And speaking of everyday heroes, there's this story about some kids in Haven, school children, who stumble across some distress signals, flares, I think, and immediately called for help.
Wow, good for them.
Right. They probably prevented something really bad from happening.
It's a good reminder to always be aware of your surroundings. You never know when you might be able to help.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's talk local politics for a minute. VP.Fo has this update on the upcoming elections in Torshavn. The Sambandsflokkurin Party just announced their candidates.
Oh, interesting.
It seems like a pretty diverse group, which is always good to see.
Absolutely. Representation matters.
For sure. And speaking of reflecting the community, VP.Fo also mentions this upcoming discussion hosted by Savni, the National Museum of the Faroe Islands. They're putting together a new cultural strategy, and they're asking for public input.
That's fantastic. It's so important for institutions like that to be engaged with the community, to listen to what people actually want.
Totally agree. It's a reminder that culture isn't this fixed thing. It's always evolving.
It's a living thing, shaped by the people.
Exactly. Okay, quick detour to the world of sports now. VP.Fo has a report on the Faroes U21 football team. They're up against Portugal, which is a pretty big deal.
That's a tough opponent.
Right. But still, what an amazing opportunity for those young athletes. Win or lose, it's got to be an incredible experience.
Absolutely. And, it's about more than just the game itself. It's about representing your country, making your people proud.
For sure. Okay, one last story before we move on. VP.Fo highlights this Faroese musician, Benjamin Rajani, who's about to drop his debut album.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they describe it as a tonal journey through the moonlight night, whatever that means, but it sounds kind of amazing, right?
It's evocative. I'm always excited to see artists pushing boundaries, trying new things.
Me too. It's really cool to see this range of stories coming from just one news source,
Yeah.
We've got global politics, local elections, sports, music, even pancakes. It's all there.
It really speaks to the interconnectedness of everything, doesn't it? No matter where you are in the world, we're all dealing with similar things, facing similar challenges, finding joy in similar ways.
It's amazing how these articles from VP.Fo can take us from the streets of Torshavn to these huge global issues, all in the same breath.
It's true. It's like a microcosm of the world.
Exactly. And this next story is a perfect example. It's about ghost nets. Those fishing nets that get lost or abandoned in the ocean?
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Thousands of them every year just floating around out there.
And they can drift for years, trapping marine life, damaging ecosystems. It's really sad.
It's heartbreaking. And it's not something you really think about every day, but it's a big deal. And what's interesting is the article mentions that the Faroe Islands, with their history, their connection to the sea.
They could actually be in a unique position to help.
Exactly. Like, imagine if they became leaders in developing new technologies to clean up those ghost nets or promote more sustainable fishing practices. That would be incredible.
It would be huge, not just for the Faroe Islands, but for the whole world.
Okay, so switching gears a bit, this next story from VP.Fo is about J.D. Vance. He's a politician in the U.S. who just did this interview where he refused to acknowledge the results of the 2020 U.S. presidential election.
Yeah, that's a worrying trend we're seeing in a lot of places, this erosion of trust in democratic institutions.
It's scary, right?
Yeah.
And it's tied into this whole thing about misinformation, propaganda. It makes you wonder what we can do about it.
It's one of the biggest challenges of our time, for sure.
On a different note, VP.Fo also mentions that October 15th is International Pregnancy and Infant Loss Remembrance Day, and it sounds like there will be commemorations in Torshavn as well.
That's important to create space for those grieving, to let them know they're not alone.
It's a reminder that these things, these losses, they matter, and we need to talk about them.
Absolutely. Silence only makes the pain worse.
Okay, one last story before we wrap things up. VP.Fo highlights the work of Sinna's Body. It's a mental health organization in the Faroe Islands.
Great organization. They do important work.
They just honored 2 people for their contributions to mental health awareness, which is so key.
It's all about breaking down stigma, right? Making it okay to talk about mental health.
Totally. Well, that feels like a good place to end our deep dive for today. We've covered a lot of ground, from international politics to local heroes, environmental challenges to artistic breakthroughs.
And through it all, we've seen this amazing resilience, this sense of community that really defines the Faroe Islands.
For sure, it's a reminder that even in a place that seems far away, there are these incredible stories unfolding, lessons to be learned, connections to be made.
And that no matter what challenges we face, there's always hope, always something to celebrate.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh,
Don't forget to check out vp.fo for all the full stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.